The Thursday morning heat on Awolowo Road came early. By 10:47 a.m., the asphalt was already holding the day's warmth like a griddle, and the traffic on the outbound lane moved in short, defeated jerks, 3 car lengths at a time, horns going flat with boredom by mid-block. The driver noticed the old man on his first pass because the man was sitting on the concrete divider in a brown jacket in October heat, holding a walking stick with a silver top in both hands and not moving. That was the first pass. The driver had a pickup at the Intercontinental in 38 minutes. A Mr. Lawson, a banker from Abuja, booked to Murtala Muhammad Airport Terminal 2. Mr. Lawson had sent 3 pre-arrival confirmation messages through the Pinnacle app before 10 a.m. The driver kept going. By the time he reached the Falomo roundabout and came back the other direction, 14 minutes had passed. The old man had not moved. A woman with a basin of fabric on her head walked past him without looking down. 2 motorcycles swerved around him. A silver SUV honked, not at the traffic but at the man, as if the man were the obstacle. The old man did not lift his head. The driver pulled the Pinnacle Executive Transfers van to the shoulder of Awolowo Road at 11:03 a.m. He activated the hazard lights. He turned off the engine. He got out. What he did not know, what nobody watching from the road that morning could have known, was that the man on the divider had spent 4 decades building one of the most consequential private sector names in Nigerian finance, and that he remembered every single person who had ever treated him like a human being when it cost them something. Tobena Okafor had been 43 years old for 2 months and 1 week. He had driven professionally for 19 years, bread delivery trucks in Surulere in his 20s, then a church-owned private hire fleet on the mainland. Then, after he passed Pinnacle Executive Transfer's 3-day driver assessment in October 2013, with the highest route knowledge score the assessor logged. That quarter, he had been issued the gray Pinnacle short-sleeve shirt with the embroidered logo patch on the left chest. He had been wearing it for 11 years and 4 months. He ironed it every night before a shift with a damp cloth over the collar, the way his mother had taught him. He was 5 feet 10, 74 kilograms. His hands were the hands of someone who had spent 2 decades with a steering wheel and a gear shift thick in the knuckles, with a small scar on the left palm from a gearbox repair he had done himself in 2009 rather than pay the mechanic's diagnostic fee. His wife Ngozi had said, the last time they had driven anywhere together, that he drove the way he thought, carefully, and always knowing exactly where he was going. She had said it the way she said most things, like it was already obvious, and she was only clarifying for the record. The accident on the Sagamu Expressway took her on a Sunday evening in 2019 when Grace was 3 years old, and Tobena had not yet found a different way to think about what had been lost. In the sun visor of Vehicle Bay 4's company van, tucked behind the third-party insurance documents, was a school photograph. Grace Okafor, age 9. St. Monica's Primary School, Surulere, summer portrait. She had a gap between her front teeth in the photograph that had since filled in. Tobena had not replaced the photograph because he wanted to keep this version, the one with the gap, which made her look like she was holding a secret and did not entirely mind that you knew. On the back, in red crayon, in the deliberate capital letters of a child who understood that writing was a serious matter, Daddy. One word. He kept a small blue notebook in the driver's side door pocket. Every trip recorded on its own line, start time, destination, mileage, any notes about the vehicle, in handwriting his mother had once called unhurried. He had filled 6 of these notebooks in 11 years. The 7th was half full. The school fees at St. Monica's were $47,500 per term. This term's payment was due in 3 days. He had mitre $31,200 in his GT Bank account. He had spoken to the school administrator, Mrs. Fashola, 2 days earlier. She had told him quietly, in the tone of a woman who had extended this particular grace before and intended to extend it again, that he had until Friday. His mother, who lived with his aunt in Onitsha, took amlodipine 5 milligrams for her blood pressure, $2,400 for 30 tablets, ordered by Tobena on the last Thursday of every month for 4 years without a single missed order. These were the facts of Tobena Okafor's life on the morning he pulled to the shoulder of Awolowo Road. He was not a man who could afford sentiment. He was a man with a light of $16,300 shortfall and a job that was the only instrument he had for closing it. He got out of the van because there was an old man in a brown jacket in October heat who had been sitting on a concrete divider for at least 16 minutes and could not stand up, and Tobena could not make himself drive past that a second time. He had tried. The old man's breathing was fast and shallow when Tabena crouched beside him. His forehead was damp but not feverish. He said he had been walking since 9:30 a.m. His cardiologist had prescribed a 45-minute morning walk after a cardiac procedure 3 months prior, and he had misjudged the heat, and his knees had done what they sometimes did now, which was simply stop. Tabena helped him to a small provision shop 40 meters from the divider. It had a red plastic canopy and a cooler of cold drinks just inside the entrance. The woman behind the counter looked at the old man's color and handed him a cold bottle of water before anyone asked. The old man drank half of it slowly. His hands, which had been shaking against the silver top of the walking stick, gradually went still. Tabena's phone rang twice during this, the Pinnacle dispatch line. He did not answer. Before he left, the old man looked at him directly for the first time. He was 73 or 74, with eyebrows that had gone fully white and a quality to his stillness that was not weakness. It was the particular stillness of someone who had arrived at a place past the need to demonstrate composure. They simply had it. He asked Tabena his full name. Tabena said, "Tabena Okafor." The old man nodded once. It was slow and deliberate, and it was not the nod of a man hearing something for the first time. It was not surprise. It was something more careful than that. The nod of a man adding something to a record he intended to consult later. Tabena could not have said why it stayed with him. He filed it away and ran back to the van. He reached the Intercontinental Hotel at 11:52 a.m. Mr. Lawson had been rerouted through the Pinnacle app at 11:35 and had taken a ride share to Terminal 2. A formal satisfaction complaint had been submitted through the corporate account portal before Mr. Lawson's flight departed. By the time Tabena reached the hotel forecourt, 4 missed calls from dispatch were on his screen. By the time he returned to the depot, the termination notice had already been drafted. Emeka Bright was 38 and had been Pinnacle's operations manager for 6 years, which meant he had processed Tabena's initial employment paperwork, but had not been in position when any of the 4 driver excellence certificates were earned. He wore reading glasses for documents and was wearing them when Tabena sat across from him. Through the glass partition behind the desk, the depot parking lot was visible. 3 Pinnacle drivers stood near the vehicles: Chukwudi, who had been at the company almost as long as Tabena, and 2 newer men. None of the 3 looked through the glass. Chukwudi had his phone out. The 2 newer men were talking to each other with their backs turned. Emeka Bright spoke without raising his voice. He had the manner of a man reading aloud from a policy document, which was close to what he was doing. Client satisfaction was the foundational metric of Pinnacle's service promise. The missed transfer had triggered a formal complaint from one of their highest-tier corporate accounts. There had been 2 documented incidents earlier in the year, a recorded exchange with dispatch in February over a unilateral route change, and a vehicle condition report filed 3 late in June. 3 documented incidents within a 12-month window constituted grounds for termination under Clause 8.3 of the staff handbook Tabena had signed in 2013. He removed his glasses and set them on the desk. He said he had no discretion here. Tabena explained what had happened, in the order it occurred, without adding anything to it. An elderly man on a concrete divider on Awolowo Road. The man could not stand. He had been there since at least 10:47 a.m. Tabena helped him to a shop nearby and waited until his hands stopped shaking. He accepted that this had made him late. Emeka Bright listened to all of it. Then he said, "The man wasn't a Pinnacle client. Any assistance rendered using a company vehicle isn't covered under our public liability policy. If something had gone wrong during that interaction, the company would have been exposed." He paused. "I'm not saying what you saw wasn't a problem, but the mistransfer and the complaint go in the file, and the file is full." He slid the termination notice across the desk. Tabena read it all the way through. He set it back down. He asked for 5 minutes to collect his belongings from Vehicle Bay 4. In the van, he took Grace's photograph from the sun visor. He took the blue notebook from the door pocket. He took the small St. Monica's school calendar Grace had made in art class, and that he had mounted on the dashboard with a strip of electrical tape. He folded his Pinnacle uniform shirt, the one he had ironed the night before, and placed it on the driver's seat with the creases facing up, parallel to the seat's edge. He locked the van. He returned the keys to the depot clerk at the front window. He walked out through the main gate at 2:37 p.m. The afternoon air outside the depot was the kind that did not move. diesel and hot concrete and the thin, sweet smoke from a suya brazier 2 stalls down the road. Tobena stood on the pavement with Grace's photograph in one hand and the blue notebook in the other. The traffic continued without him. The suya man turned his meat on the grill. A woman in a green wrapper walked past with a sleeping child on her back, the child's head resting against her shoulder, as though the shoulder were the softest place in the city. He called his sister Chidima at 3:05 p.m. She answered on the second ring. He told her he had left the job, not fired. He was not certain afterward which word was more accurate. She asked if he was all right 3 times, and he said yes 3 times. She said, "Come for dinner on Sunday." He said he would. He sat on the low concrete wall at the bus stop on Ozumba Mbadiwe Avenue. He opened the blue notebook to the back page, reserved for calculations, and wrote out the numbers in 2 columns. Income, nothing. Fixed obligations, 47,503 days, 2,419 days, rent in 24 days. He looked at the 2 columns for a long time. He closed the notebook. A hawker woman near the bus stop, a woman who had seen him here before on early mornings in his Pinnacle uniform, looked at him sitting on the wall in the middle of a workday afternoon with a notebook in his hand and no uniform on. She did not ask what had happened. She reached into the cooler beside her tray and handed him a sachet of cold pure water. When he reached for his wallet, she shook her head. He drank the water and watched the road. On the bus home, his mind returned to the old man's nod, the deliberate, unhurried nod after Tobena had said his full name. It had not been a nod of someone receiving information and filing it away. There had been something else in it, something that looked more like recognition than surprise. He told himself this was not worth thinking about. There were 16,300 problems that were more immediate. By Friday evening, he had made 4 calls to former industry contacts and visited 2 smaller transport companies. The first had no vacancies and suggested January. At the second, a former colleague named Oki told him the position was almost certainly his and texted at 6:18 p.m. to confirm it. "I think it's yours, bro. They liked you." Saturday morning at 9:40 a.m., Oki called again. The vacancy had been filled internally the previous afternoon. The external search had been quietly abandoned. He was sorry. He kept saying it. Tobena thanked him and said it was fine. He sat in his kitchen after the call and did not do anything for a while. Grace's school bag was by the door. Her water bottle was on the counter, pink with a drawing of a rabbit on the side. The apartment was quiet in the way that apartments are quiet on a Saturday morning when a child is at a neighbor's and a man has nowhere he is scheduled to be. If this story already sitting in your chest the way I think it is, stay with it, because what happened in the next 48 hours is something neither Emeka Bright nor anyone at Pinnacle Executive Transfers was ever supposed to know.
Mrs.
Adiazi Owusu was 68 years old and had occupied the 3rd floor of Tobena's building for 7 years, which made her his most durable neighbor. She kept a transistor radio outside her door on the landing and listened to it every morning with a cup of Milo while the rest of the building came and went. She had in 7 years watched Tobena leave for work in his Pinnacle uniform at 5:45 a.m. on most mornings without fail. On Saturday afternoon, she was on the landing when he came back from a walk, and she looked at his face the way she had always looked at things, directly, without the social kindness of pretending not to see. She asked what had happened. He sat on the landing steps. The radio was playing something low. He told her the man on Awolowo Road, the missed pickup, the termination notice, Okake's call. She did not interrupt. She held her Milo cup in both hands and listened to the whole of it. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "The old man on Awolowo Road," she said. "Did he wear a brown jacket? Carry a walking stick with a silver handle?" Tobena went still, he said. Mrs. Adaze looked at her cup. "That is Chief Dubem Chukwemeka," she said. She said it the way one states a fact that is simply true, not dramatically, not with any particular emphasis. He was chairman of First Continental Holdings for 34 years. He still sits on 2 boards. His cardiologist put him on a morning walking program after a cardiac stent procedure in July. He told me when I saw him at a church event that same month. He walks alone on Awolowo Road because he says the men who used to accompany him always walked at the speed of what they wanted from him. Tobena did not speak. "He is not a man who forgets a face," she said. "I have known people who worked for him for 20 years. They all say the same thing." She paused. "He told me once, this was years ago, when he was still active chairman, he said the only thing left worth knowing about a person after you have seen what money and need do to human behavior, is what they do when it costs them something, and nobody important is watching. She looked at Tabena steadily. Nobody stopped for him that morning. You stopped twice, once going, once coming back. At 8:47 that evening, his phone rang. One prefix he didn't recognize. A woman's voice, measured and professional. Good evening, sir. I'm calling on behalf of Chief D.E. Chukwemeka. He would like to know if you are available for a brief conversation this coming Monday morning at 9 o'clock. She paused. He asked me to convey this to you exactly as he said it. He said, tell the driver from Awolowo Road that I remember his name, Tabena said. He would be there. The building at 14 Adeola Odeku Street in Victoria Island was 22 floors of dark glass and brushed steel, and the lobby had the air temperature of somewhere that had never encountered Lagos in October. The floor was polished granite. The reception desk was staffed by a young woman in a cream blouse who had been looking at her phone when Tabena walked through the glass doors at 9:09 a.m. on Monday. By the time he said his name and explained he was there to see Chief Chukwemeka, she had the phone face down on the desk and both hands on the keyboard. He was taken to the 18th floor. The elevator rose without sound. The corridor outside opened into a wide carpeted passage with framed photographs along both walls, construction sites in varying states of completion, boardroom signings with men in suits shaking hands across wide tables, a groundbreaking ceremony with red laterite earth piled at the edge of a rectangular foundation. Near the corner, one photograph showed a younger man in a yellow hard hat smiling at the camera with his sleeves rolled up, surrounded by workers holding shovels. The plaque read, First Continental Holdings, Badagry Inland Port Development, 1997. Tabena was shown to a small meeting room and told to wait. He sat. He placed his hands flat on the table. The room smelled faintly of cedar and conditioned air. He did not wait long. Chief Dubum Chukwemeka came through a connecting door from a private office. Not the corridor, not announced, not escorted. He was in a white agbada of plain cotton, no jewelry except a watch on his left wrist. He moved with the same walking stick, and he moved with it the way certain men move with age, not fighting it, simply accounting for it. He was the same man from the road. In this room, with the framed records of 34 years on the walls and the Lagos Island skyline through the 18th floor windows, the stillness that had read as endurance on the concrete divider read as something else entirely. The room did not transform when he entered it. The room clarified, as though the furniture and the light and the carpet had been waiting for something to organize itself around. He sat across from Tabena at the round table. He poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal pitcher that had been placed there before either of them arrived. He pushed one glass toward Tabena. He asked 2 questions. He let the space between them stay as space. How many years did you work for that company? Tabena said, 11 years and 4 months. The chief nodded. What is your daughter's name? Tabena said Grace. The chief held this for a moment. Then he said quietly, Good. He explained what was being offered without ceremony or decoration. His private household fleet comprised 6 vehicles, 3 sedans, 2 SUVs, 1 minibus, the head driver position, overseeing route planning and scheduling for household staff, vehicle maintenance and log keeping, and liaison with the estate manager at the Banana Island residence, had been vacant since February. He had conducted 19 interviews in that time. The position remained empty. The monthly salary was $380,000. There was a housing support allowance of $45,000 monthly. There was a school fees provision, drawn quarterly from the household staff benefits account for 1 dependent child up to secondary school completion. Tabena kept his hands flat on the table and did not move them. Chief Chukwemeka looked at him directly. I have employed drivers for 31 years, he said. I have learned that a man's driving record tells you very little. What he decides to do when the road costs him something, that tells you everything. He stood. The meeting was complete. He extended his hand across the table. When can you begin? Tabena said. Thursday. The chief's grip was firm and unhurried. Thursday, he said. 1 word. The conversation was over. 2 days later at 4:23 p.m. on a Wednesday, a letter arrived by courier at the Pinnacle Executive Transfers Depot. It was on First Continental Holdings letterhead, signed by Chief Chukwemeka's executive secretary and countersigned by the FCH legal director. It stated that following a completed vendor review, First Continental Holdings had determined that its proposed 3-year corporate transport contract covering executive airport transfers intercity travel, and event logistics for FCH board members and senior staff, with an estimated annual value of $47 million, would be directed to another provider. No further explanation was offered. Emeka Bright called Tobina's number at 6:47 p.m. He called again at 7:04 p.m. Tobina saw both calls. He set his phone face down on the kitchen table. He was helping Grace with a mathematics problem in her homework book. She pressed her pencil very hard into the page when she was concentrating, as if the answer needed to be pushed down into the paper to stay. He helped her finish the problem. She helped him clear the table. Then it was bedtime. Emeka Bright looked at Tobina Okafor on a Thursday afternoon in October and saw a driver who had broken protocol. He saw a missed transfer client complaint, a third incident in a calendar year, and a clause in a staff handbook that left him no room. He saw what was in front of him, which was all he knew how to look for. What he did not see was what Tobina was carrying: 19 years of road memory, 6 blue notebooks of meticulous handwriting, a photograph in a sun visor, and the capacity to pull over when every professional and financial pressure in his life said, "Keep driving." He did not see that some things a person carries cannot be inventoried in a personnel file or taken back by a termination notice. You can remove a person. You can take the uniform, issue the paperwork, change the depot access code, process the final payment. What you cannot do is erase the moment they stopped when it cost them something and nobody important was watching. That moment is already in the record, not the company's record, which gets archived and eventually discarded, but the permanent record a person keeps of who they are, the one that outlasts every employment contract they ever signed and every door that was closed on them. Some people spend their lives driving past the man on the divider. Some pull over. The difference is not training or circumstances or whether the timing is convenient. It is simply who a person is when the hazard lights are theirs to switch on. And it turns out, it has always turned out, that the world has a way of finding this out eventually. On the first Thursday of November at 7:15 a.m., Grace Okafor sat in the front passenger seat of a dark gray Land Cruiser while her father ran his pre-shift inspection. She had asked permission to sit in the front 3 times, and he had said yes 3 times. She wanted to know what every button on the dashboard did, and he named each one. She wanted to know which was his favorite. He pointed to the hazard light switch, the orange triangle on the center console. She pressed it once, carefully with 2 fingers, to hear the clicking and watch the dashboard lights pulse. Then she pressed it again to turn it off. She looked at her father. He told her, "Some things you will understand when you are older. Some things in life you just stop for." Now, here is a question I want you to sit with. If you were driving a company vehicle, already running late for an important pickup, and you saw an old man alone and struggling by the side of the road, would you stop? And if you knew that stopping might cost you the job, would you still believe when you got home that night that you had made the right choice? Leave your answer in the comments. I genuinely want to read it. Subscribe for more stories about quiet courage, hidden strength, and the people the world overlooks until they change everything. I'll see you in the next one.